What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and today we are back with another installment in the Emacs Desktop Environment series. This time we're going to continue polishing the configuration we started making for Exwm in the previous episode, and we're going to try to make it into a more rich day-to-day experience. I guess really what we're trying to do is to take the basic configuration we created last time and then make it so that you could use this on a day-to-day basis, and you can do most of the things that you would want to do if you were using another desktop environment. So as usual, we are recording this live. So I just want to say hello to Ethan, Kevin, Miguel, and Jerry L in the chat. Thanks everybody for joining. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So as I mentioned, we've been setting up the Emacs Window Manager, Exwm. So last time we basically just got the initial configuration set up so we could boot into Emacs and load Exwm so that it could take care of our window management and be the foundation of our own custom Emacs-based desktop environment. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to take that configuration we made and shift it over into another file. We're going to make a new org mode file for our literate configuration for Exwm. It's going to be called desktop.org. This is also going to be in the same Emacs from scratch repo that we've been working in so far, so you'll be able to find that there after the stream is complete. So we're looking at this file right now. Basically, I just took the existing window management section we created last time and copied it over. And there's nothing else. Oh, actually, another thing that I did is I moved in the other files that we created as a part of that configuration to their own section for desktop environment. So you can see that I am creating the desktop file, the exwm.desktop file, the launcher script start exwm.sh, the xmodmap file, and the xresources file. So basically all those extra files that we created the last stream, we were putting them into our literate configuration file so that we can see all of our configuration in one place. So now that we've done this, one thing we have to keep in mind is that our auto tangle configuration is not set up to tangle this particular file automatically when we save it. So if I save this file, you'll just see that it wrote the file out and we're not actually running org babel tangle, I believe is the command for that. So we're going to go into our emacs.org configuration and we're going to add the config for that part. Mitch Kyle asks, does a desktop file work in .local/share/x-sessions? I don't know. It might work. It really depends on what your login manager does with that folder. If it looks in that folder, then it will work. Otherwise, it may not work. You may have to set it up in the /user/share/x-sessions folder. Let's see. So we want to go to the auto tangle config. And what we want to do is change this so that currently we're looking at the specific file at emacs.org. We're trying to see if the file that we're editing is at emacs.org. And this is in our after save hook function for org mode buffers. What I want to do is use the file name directory function so that I'm, instead of looking at the file name, full file name of the buffer, I want to get the directory name of the buffer, or the full directory path. And then I want to expand the path to our .emacs.d folder. And I'm sure somebody's going to tell me that there's a more efficient way to do this editing, but that's fine. .emacs.d. So now what we are trying to figure out here is the file we're editing inside of our .emacs.d folder. And if it is, let's go ahead and auto tangle that. So any .org file inside of our .emacs.d folder will be auto tangled. And it will only be in the root .emacs.d folder. It won't be in a subfolder. So let's just check this code real quick. And in fact, let me set up global command log mode, CLM open command log buffer. I should probably set up a key binding for that. So I'm going to use Control-X, Control-E to evaluate this. It says nil for this file. Let's see why. So if I expand that, it says .emacs.d. If I expand this, I think, okay, that should be fine. .emacs.d. Okay, I think I need to add the ending slash on that before it will evaluate the true. Okay, cool. So now this evaluates the true. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to reevaluate this function so that the hook is now updated. And now I'll go back to our desktop.org file. I'll just change a line and then save the file again. And we can see now that we've tangled up 5 code blocks. So now if you have any other .org files, if you want to start separating out parts of your configuration into separate org files, this update to our auto tangle functionality will allow you to do that. Let's see. Mitch Kyle also says, should I use the user Emacs directory? Yes, you can use that if you don't change your user Emacs directory, but in the Emacs from scratch config, at least the way that I run it, sometimes I do change that value, or I load the init file from a different place. So just for the sake of sanity for our configuration, we're using the .emacs.d directly, but it is a good point. You can use the user Emacs directory for that to double check the path. And specifically, he's asking about this place where I'm saying expand file name .emacs.d. We could use the user Emacs directory variable, which is user Emacs directory. And if you look at the value for that, it is .emacs.d by default, but that could be changed if you were to change your configuration somehow. So let's move on to our desktop config. So now we've rewritten out all the files. The org tangle has written out all of these files for us. So now we're basically back to where we were before. So let me check my notes and see what we want to do next. Okay, so the important thing about this is now that we've moved out the window manager config from the emacs.org file, we're going to have to load that somehow whenever we start up Emacs so that Exwm will start up. And what I'm going to do to make this happen is I'm going to add a little bit of extra code to our invocation in the start exwm.sh file. So if I go back to our desktop.org, I can jump down to the script for that here, the launcher script. And I'm going to add this little bit at the end, the -l, which is the -- load parameter for Emacs. Basically says once Emacs finishes loading, load an additional script or load an additional Emacs list file into the process. So we're going to load this .emacs.d/desktop.el, and that is the file that this desktop.org outputs by default. So if we look into this folder, desktop.el, we're going to see it's all the Emacs list for our desktop configuration. So let's really quickly go and try to restart Emacs and see if this works. And let's double check our start, our exwm/start exwm shell script to see that it's there. The parameter is there. So now let's just give it a try. Let's see if we can restart Emacs. Hopefully nothing unexpected is going to happen as a result of this. All right, so now Emacs starts up, and we're going through the normal load process. Okay, so we've got this issue with the Emacs SQLite binary. Let me just go disable forge real quick because that has been an issue here. So if I go to my init.el, you technically won't have to do this, but I'm just doing it right now to make things a little bit simpler. Make sure I didn't break my keyboard setup. There we go. Okay, so let's search for forge. I'm going to go and comment that out temporarily, then I'll fix it in the original org file in a second. We'll log back out and then log in again. To log out, I'm using Control-X, Control-C to exit Emacs. To log out in Exwm, you just exit Emacs and it will log you out. All right, now we're loading up again. And it's thinking. All right, so now we're back into Exwm. I believe our workspace switching key bindings are working. Our screen did not change resolution, but I think that's because I replaced the configuration that was there. So let me go back into our desktop.org file and then go add our xrandr invocation back, because I've got it commented out in the configuration that I committed last week. So now I can just actually run that myself here. I run Control-X, Control-E. All right, now we're back to the resolution that we expect to be. Okay, so next is we're going to try to add some extra logic after Exwm loads to do some extra configuration to Exwm as it starts up. So I'm going to copy over a little bit of code here, and I'll explain to you what it's doing. But the idea is that we're going to set up a function that is able to run programs in the background so that we can do things like launching applications we need. And let me run a program real quick. I think it's Spice VD agent. I just need to be able to paste into this buffer. Is that not running? All right. Let's see. Okay, let me see if I can paste now. Okay, that's not working, but let's go back and then we can grab that text. So this will allow us to run things like system tray applications, etc. So that we're going to try to load a couple of those to make our experience better. But for now, we're just going to talk about what this stuff does. So this EFS run in background command, I don't know if I got this from the Exwm wiki or from someone else's configuration. You don't need to understand everything that this code is doing because it's actually using some more advanced Emacs Lisp syntax. But the idea here is that for a given command string, we are going to use the call process function to launch whatever command you're giving here. So you basically just give it the name of a program or the name of a program with some arguments to this function. It will run it in the background, so it doesn't block Emacs main functionality. We're also going to create a hook for the Exwm Init hook. And what we're doing here is we're going to switch to workspace 1 by default after Exwm finishes loading up so that you don't have the problem of thinking you're already on workspace 1, but you're actually on workspace 0. And then when you switch back to workspace 1, you see nothing that you expect to because everything's on 0 instead. So what I like to do is to make sure that we start on the workspace number 1 whenever we start up Exwm. Another thing you can do is you can launch some buffer by default that you want to. Like for me, I start my Emacs session directly into eShell because it allows me to just start navigating around the places I want to be. But you can also load a package like Emacs Dashboard or load up a particular org mode file that you want to see every time that you log into your desktop environment. So that's something that you can do here. And then we're going to use this EFS run in background command to run Enum applet, which is the network manager system tray icon, so that you can do like connect to Wi-Fi networks or to VPNs, etc. So let's also add a hook for the Exwm init hook. So what we're going to do is copy this hook right here and then say, let's see, when Exwm starts up, do some extra configuration. So now we're going to use the Exwm init hook, and we are going to hook this to Exwm init hook. All right, so now I'm gonna evaluate these functions here. So let's evaluate this one, and then this one. I'm using Control X, Control E on these, and then I'll evaluate this hook. Well, actually, we should start over Exwm just to make this work. I think any of these would work right now, but let's start over Exwm just to see what happens as a result of doing this. Mitch asks, any reason to use call process over start process shell command like in Exwm? I don't know. Now, I did see someone was telling me that they were having problems with one of the screenshotting commands, or maybe it was Xclip. They said that they had trouble getting it to work if they didn't use call process. Like they used start process shell command and it didn't inherit the right kind of X environment to do what it needed to do, but calling it with call process somehow did work. So I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between those two in terms of how they invoke the subprocess, but there may be some difference there. So if you have trouble using start process shell command, then you might want to try using call process instead. All right, so now we've booted back into Exwm. We actually do see we have an icon down in the system tray now for Network Manager. So this is going to start every time we start up Exwm now, which is great because you do need to know, like if you're using a laptop all the time like I am, you need to have your Wi-Fi set up. So since this is a VM, it doesn't have Wi-Fi, so I can't show you the connection, but you can at least see that if you click on the icon, the context menu does show up. Now let's see what else we want to say about that. So one other thing that's kind of useful to say about system tray, I will jump ahead a little bit and grab one piece of code just to make an example here. One thing you might notice with Exwm system tray, that module, is that sometimes icons will not show up. And I don't know why exactly that happens, but it seems that the resolution or something that will reduce the likelihood that your icons don't show up is to set the height of the system tray before it actually loads up. I have to run that eShell, the Spice VD agent again. So that I'm only having to run Spice VD agent because I need to be able to copy things and paste them into my VM. So let's see, height. All right, so let me just copy that one more time and paste it in. Okay, so what we're doing is we're saying we want our system tray icons to be a height of 32. By default, it just picks a value on its own, and I think that the value that it picks causes problems sometimes with icons, so it's better to just be explicit about what the height is supposed to be so that any of the icons you load here should load up. We'll find out a little bit later when we start loading more programs to see whether this actually will fix the issue for us, so I'll be curious to see what happens there. All right, so now let's do something that's going to make this look a lot better. What we're going to do is set a background in our session, and we're going to change the opacity of Emacs to make the background show up, much like what you see on the screen right now. This is my personal configuration, and you can see that there is a background image, and you can see through the Emacs to see the background. So we're going to set up that same thing inside of our configuration. So first of all, you need to understand that while Emacs does have the ability to make itself transparent, the frame transparent, it won't work unless you have a compositor turned on inside of your X Windows session. So the thing about compositing is that the compositor is able to take the windows that are visible on the screen and then make them show on top of each other, or maybe make them transparent. And it can also help with things like scrolling inside of browsers. Like maybe if you've ever used Firefox on a machine when you've used like i3 and you never set up a compositor, when you start scrolling the browser, you'll see that it has like jaggy lines in it because it's tearing. When you use a compositor, often it smooths that out by enforcing a refresh rate, or maybe using hardware acceleration to make the rendering look better. So it's very good to have a compositor in this kind of setup where you're doing the window management yourself with a simpler window manager like Exwm or i3, etc. For our purposes, we're going to use a compositor called Compton. Apparently, there is a newer version of Compton called PyCom now, but I did not find it in the Ubuntu 20 repository that I'm using right now. So we're going to use Compton instead because it's basically the same thing as far as I can tell, and it works well for our purposes. So we're going to install that, and then we're going to run it. So let's go back over to eShell, and then we are going to use sudo apt install Compton. And then it's going to ask us to confirm. Sure, yes. And now I'm going to run Compton whenever this finishes installing. eShell is not looking very great today with the output of apt. Let's see. So we're going to run Compton with ampersand to make it run in the background. Okay, so nothing happens. So you can't really tell that anything is going on yet. So let's move forward and see what else we need to do to make this work. So to actually set the screen background, we can use a program called Feh. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, but it's F-E-H. I'm going to install that, and then I'm going to run a command that will use one of the existing backgrounds on the machine and set that in the session. So let's install Feh right now. Install Feh. And then after that runs, we will run Feh. And I'll show you something that maybe you know about, maybe you don't. But often in Linux distributions, you will see that there is a common folder where the backgrounds that come with the distribution are stored. It is in this user share backgrounds folder. So in this folder, you'll see that there are multiple backgrounds that come with Ubuntu by default. We're going to use this Matt McNulty NYC background. So I'm going to run this right now, and you'll see it doesn't actually do anything either. But that's because we have not set the transparency of the Emacs frame yet to allow that background to be visible through. So now we're going to add that as well. So there is the set frame parameter function. And what that does is allows you to configure the frame of Emacs. So in Emacs terminology, a frame is actually a window in your desktop environment, whereas a window is like a pane inside of Emacs to show a particular buffer. So in this case, we're configuring the frame, and we're going to tell it that it needs to have a certain transparency level. I'm going to go ahead and put this into our emacs.org file instead of desktop.org, because what we want is for this to show up even if we're not using Exwm. So let's say you also use Emacs on Windows or Mac OS, and you want to use transparency there also, but not just in Exwm. To do that, it's better to put that into your emacs.org file. So let's go to our basic UI configuration, and I'm going to drop this in here. And what this does is we're saying set frame parameter for the selected frame. We're setting alpha of that frame to 90%. And I believe the 90-90 is referring to when the frame is active and when it's inactive. Yeah, I think that's the case. So basically, you can set a frame to be more transparent whenever it's inactive versus active. I just tend to keep it the same value because I don't really care that much about showing it differently that way. You may also want to adjust this value to your taste depending on what your background is or what kind of opacity you like. So I'm going to run this set frame parameter line right now with Control X, Control E. And you can see now that we can see our background through Emacs. We can actually see that on the screen. Also, we're going to set the default frame A list to configure alpha to 9090 because what we're doing before is we're setting the alpha on the current frame, but we also want to set the alpha value on all new frames that get created by Emacs. So we need to set it in the default frame A list. If you go look at that variable, it is basically just the default configuration for any new frame that gets created. And it has some stuff that's already set there by default about setting scroll bars, fringe, etc. So this is important in Exwm because Exwm uses frames for each workspace. So you want to make sure that you have this set so that whenever Exwm sets multiple frames up, they will all have the same transparency. Another thing that I do is I set the frame to be maximized by default. You may not like this on other outside of Exwm. It's good in Exwm because it will make sure that Emacs is maximized as soon as Exwm starts up. But in other window managers or in like Windows or Mac OS, maybe you don't want it to be maximized all the time. Typically I do, but if you don't want that, you could either move these lines to desktop.org somewhere, or you could just take them out entirely. So now that we've got that set up, what we need to do is to make sure that feh gets run every time, and also Compton gets run every time we start up Exwm to make sure that this configuration is available. So we're going to do a couple things here. We are going to we're going to create a function called set wallpaper, and it's going to use start process shell command. This goes back to what Mitch was asking earlier. So we'll use start process shell command here, and we're going to put this in our desktop.org file. And we're going to set this right after where we change the screen resolution. And the reason we want to do that is because we are using we have to do a little indentation magic here. Sorry for those who are annoyed by this. All right, so we're using these BG scale parameter for feh, which basically says I want to make my background take up the whole screen. And you need to do that after you set the resolution, because otherwise it's going to take up some other amount of the screen, or it's going to be tiled. It's going to look really weird. So make sure that you are, whoops, actually I need to move this somewhere else. Make sure that you are running the EFS set wallpaper function after your you call xrender if you're using that to set your screen resolution. So I'm going to put this up here somewhere. We're going to paste back the set wallpaper function. I'll just move that over a little bit. Okay. So let me run this. And then I'll also run the function itself just to show you that it works. So I'm going to hit Control X, Control E. It's going to run it. You're not going to see any difference because we already have the screen resolution set. Let's see, set the wallpaper after changing the resolution. Okay. So now we also need to set up Compton, and we're going to do that inside of the startup script because we want to make sure this runs before we start up Exwm. So we're going to run the screen compositor, and we will say Compton ampersand. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Let me check that file real fast. Exwm start Exwm. Okay, Compton is there. Let's log out real fast and just make sure that this all works whenever we start it back up, and then we can move forward after that. GK sudo asked, is start process shell command likely to block Emacs if the process doesn't complete? As Mitch says, no, it's async. Basically, it runs it as an async subprocess. Oh, great, Forge again. I forgot to set that line in our Emacs.org file. So yeah, it will not block your Emacs process, which is a good thing. Let's find Forge here. And then I'm going to comment this out real fast. And I will run org babel tangle on this file. And then I'll log out one more time and log back in because I broke that. And this time, whenever we load up, we should see that the background gets set after the screen resolution changes. Okay, so we have the background now, we have the transparency, and then the frame goes full screen. And now we will be in Emacs after it took a moment to load up. Okay, so now we're back to where we were. Let's look at my notes. So the next step will be, whenever you use a normal desktop environment, you normally have access to keys for changing your screen brightness, changing the volume of your audio device, muting the audio device, lots of things like that. Obviously, those are not set up by default in our Exwm environment. Like if I were to hit the screen volume keys, I don't even know what it's doing right now. It's using F2, I think. Oh, I totally broke my my mode line too, it seems. I'm not sure what mode I just ran when I hit F2 a couple times. But we can use a different package called desktop environment to set up some of these bindings for us to some programs that will make it easier for us to control our environment without the help of a bigger desktop environment like XFCE or GNOME or KDE, etc. So I'm going to go over and grab some config real fast. Also, you should check out the repo for the desktop environment package on GitHub because it does give a lot of information about what kinds of things it configures and what programs it depends on, and what key bindings it sets up. So if you want to know what kind of key bindings here that you might need to set yourself if you want to do these things yourself, then you need to go check out what these key names are, and that will be helpful for you. So I'll copy this bit of code here, and I'll jump back over to our desktop environment. I will load up desktop.org, and I will drop this. I'll put it right here for now, but maybe I'll move it later. Oh, once again, I have to run spice vd agent. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to paste that line in after I recopy it because spice vd agent didn't actually get it. All right, so now we are loading the desktop environment package. We're going to tell it to load after Exwm, and in the config, we're going to run desktop environment mode because we just want it to load automatically whenever it gets pulled in. I'm also setting some customizable variables here for different things. So for me, I'm changing the increment of the brightness changes whenever you use the brightness keys. There's a lot of other things you can change in this package too. If you check out the customize group command and look for desktop environment. Actually, I need to install it first before I can do that. Let me install that. Let's update our package repo. Refresh contents. Always a nice thing to have to do. Okay, now I can run it again. Now it's loaded. Let's run customize group one more time. And now we will look for desktop environment. And you can see there's a lot of variables here, like the command to use for setting Bluetooth, the command for getting the brightness, the increment and decrement of the brightness, screen lighting commands, music commands, keyboard backlight commands, etc. So we have all this stuff there that gets set up by default. However, if you don't have some of these prerequisites installed, then these keys won't work. Like we can try to use the audio keys right now. Actually, why is that happening? I think maybe what's happening is that I don't have my function lock turned on. So I'm gonna use my function key for this. All right, so I'm using the volume keys on my laptop keyboard, and you can see that I'm changing the volume value. However, when I do the same thing for brightness, nothing happens. That's because we need to install the brightness control program to do that. So I'm actually going to install a few of the things we need all together here. We're going to install the scrot tool for taking screenshots. We're going to install brightness control for controlling the brightness. And we're going to install player control for controlling audio playback, which obviously we're not going to have any audio playback in the VM here, but it's just sort of by example, we'll show that you need to install those things. So I'll load up eShell real fast and then run this sudo apt install command to install all these programs. I don't think I'll be able to control the brightness in this VM, but at least we have the program installed so that these commands would work if I could control the brightness. So now that they're installed, if I use the brightness functions, I think maybe it's setting the brightness on my own computer, but let's see, muting the audio device. Whoops, that's F1. Muting the audio device, unmuting. What else can we do? There's a lot of things involved there. So you can also check out the functions from desktop environment. for things. You can use these functions yourself if you want to automate certain things in your window manager. So like toggling music or muting, toggling Bluetooth, toggling your microphone, etc. So you can run these commands yourself if you want to invoke these behaviors. And also you can customize the variables to tell it what programs to use for those things. So if you don't like the default programs, or if you have better ones that you prefer, or if your Linux distribution doesn't come with these programs, you need to install different ones, then you can still configure all of those to taste. Now, I'm going to show you one last thing. I'm going to use print screen to do a screenshot of where we're at right now. So I just press print screen. And now I'm going to use DRED to go to our pictures folder. And it should have stored our squat screen capture. If I open this file, you'll see we have a picture here. It doesn't really look like it because we're looking at the same thing already, but if I were to use like the bracket keys, you can see I'm flipping the image, so it actually is an image. So just like that, we have the ability to take screenshots in Exwm, so that's pretty nice. Let's see. Chowu says, I improved my experience with Exwm by installing Mate. Yes, you can run Exwm inside of another desktop environment, and I will show that in another video. That would save you from a lot of this effort we're doing here, but for me, I prefer to have like full control over my environment, and this is why we're sort of doing it from scratch this way. Let's see, GK Sudo says, he usually sets a global key to toggle line and character mode so the inputs go directly to the X app in the buffer. Yeah, you should definitely set those up if you use that a lot. And I think he was replying to Fatih, who asks, tried system keys and they only worked in text buffers at Emacs, not in Firefox. Yeah, that's a good point. You may need to use the Exwm input set key. Exwm input set key, I believe is the right one. So that sets a global binding that works even in X buffers. This is the one to use if you want to set some global binding to a function or a command. Okay, moving right along. So now we're going to look at system tray apps. So one thing we are missing, like if you were to use a normal panel in a windowing system like GNOME or XFCE, normally it would give you things like the time, the battery level, the Bluetooth connectivity, Wi-Fi, volume, etc. And since we don't have a panel yet, we are going to have to do a lot of that ourselves. And one nice thing in the Linux ecosystem is that there are system tray applications that give you this functionality, so you don't need to have a panel if you don't want one. So what we're going to do is we are going to install a few different programs here, and I will tell you about those as we get them installed. So we're going to use the Blueman program because it has a program with it called Blueman Applet, which is a system tray applet for Bluetooth controls. We're going to use the PAVU control, the PAVU control if you want to call it that, for pulse audio volume control. Actually, it has a separate program for the, I think it's called the PAVU applet or something. What is it called? Yeah, PA sys tray. Let me actually pull that up, sys tray. Maybe PAVU control has its own. I need to check that real quick. But these will allow us to control the volume and Bluetooth from the system tray, which is kind of nice to have. So we're going to add some extra code here inside of our desktop.org. And we're going to go put it in the same place where we were calling for nm applet to be loaded. So if I look for nm applet, I can copy this line a couple times and then launch other things in the background. So we'll run nm applet first, we'll use PA sys tray, and then we'll use Blueman applet. And if I run them right now, you'll see that they will show up in the system tray. So now, actually, we do see a bug I'm going to tell you about. So we have the volume control and we have the nm applet. You can click on these to get their system tray icon menus. Looks like Blueman applet didn't run. I'm interested in why that happened. Let's try this, Blueman applet. There's already an instance running. So for some reason, that one didn't show up. It could be the same bug I was talking about with Exwm system tray, where sometimes icons don't show up correctly. So just be aware, if you're going to use this way of showing things in the system tray, it may have problems from time to time. In a future episode, it could be the next one, it could be one after that, we're going to show how to use Polybar, the actual panel, to have a system tray and have everything else that we would normally want to have for this kind of behavior in our Emacs setup. So That will give us a better experience. But until then, you can do this to have some level of system tray control for certain things like audio and Bluetooth. Let's see, what else we got here? So I mentioned the system tray height setting already. Oh, I do want to mention I did install the PA volume control app. So if I were to run that, let's say Pavu control, it does give you a nice interface for managing your audio interfaces. So for recording, for playback, etc. So if you are using Exwm, this is a very helpful thing to have to control your audio volume and everything else. So now we're going to look at the battery and time display. So battery display won't work on this computer, or sorry, in this VM, but I can show you right here. If I were to run the display battery mode on my laptop, display battery mode, now inside of this buffer, you'll see that I have a battery icon. And the reason why this looks so nice is because the Doom mode line will take the normal battery display and then sort of prettify it a little bit so that it has a nice icon and it tells you the battery percentage. It still does something like that on normal plain Emacs mode lines. So you can get that behavior either way. But in this case, it looks pretty nice. However, there's one thing to note that things that show up in the mode line sometimes don't update as soon as they should automatically. Sometimes you have to like do something in the buffer before the mode line will get updated. So you might see that you have 97% battery, but actually you may have 65% battery depending on how long your screen has been sitting there. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Similarly for the date and time, you can use the display time mode. And I will grab these things and put them into our config real fast. Let's see, we can put them here, I would say, inside the init hook. These are things you may want to have inside your main Emacs configuration as well, but we're just going to put them here for now for our convenience. So I will run display time mode, and now you'll see that we have a time indicator down in the mode line, which will tell you what time it is currently. If you were to set this display time, day, and date variable to true, if we look at that, what it says is that it means that display time should display day and date as well as a time. Let's run that real quick, and then let's restart the display time mode. Let's run it one more time, display time mode. Oh, I really need to set up something else on here. All right, now we see that it's Friday, November 20th at 9:52 a.m. So that's a nice thing to have. We can also use the display time format if you want to be really clear about what the format is for your time. So if we look at that variable name, display time format, it would normally, it's nil, but you can set it to a particular format string to format the time however you like. And if you look at the documentation for the format time string function, it will tell you the different format parameters for the date and the time. So let's say I just wanted to see the date. I could just set up this format here with the MDY. Let's run this in eval. Set q display time format, and I will put this into the string here. And now if I start over display time mode, let's see if running this like this does it. Yeah, now you can see that we have the date in the format that I specified it. So that's a thing you can also do. You can set the format to be whatever you want, really. Let's see, who else has asked questions? Lazo asks, can you have functionality like Xmonad master stack mode? I have not used Xmonad, so I don't really know what that is. It's possible, but I'm not sure. Johan asks, yeah, oh, Johan had a tip, but I think he decided not to paste it. Mitch Kyle says there's also fancy battery for more fancy output. Is it built in fancy? No, I think that's an external package, so you may have to look that up, but it's I think fancy battery mode or something like that. Let's see, where are we at? Okay. And Miguel asks, what is the package that I'm using for centering my buffer? I am using the visual fill column mode package. Johan says Olivetti works. That also does work, yeah. But if you look in the Emacs from scratch configuration in the emacs.org file, visual fill column mode, you can just copy this configuration and it will do the same thing. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? Okay, so the last couple things. One is so far we've been launching applications by either running them in eShell or using super ampersand or I think it's shift alt or alt ampersand, I think. But there is a better app launcher that comes with Council, which is the Council Linux app command. But I'm gonna show you how it works, but we're also gonna do something that will make it look even better. So if you were to use Council Linux app, it will show you a list of all the applications that you have installed on your machine. So basically, it's any actual desktop application that has a .desktop file attached to it. So it won't be every program that you have installed. It will only be ones that are intended to be desktop apps. So we can see like Firefox is here. If I were to press enter on that, it will load Firefox. So if I close that, we can actually make this Council Linux app look better. So one thing I don't like about it is it kind of tells you what program it's going to run here, which is nice. But if you use a distro like Geeks, where all of the program paths are very long because they have like the GNU store path in front, I'll tell you what I mean by that. Look at what it looks like on my machine. There's this crazy long path in the beginning, and then you see the name of the application. You can turn that path part off so that it looks more clean, so it would look something more like Rofi. If you've ever used Rofi before as an application launcher, it would look more like that. So we're going to go into our emacs.org config, and we're going to look for our council config. And I'm going to go to the top of this, or right here. I'm going to paste in a custom variable configuration. And what we're setting is this Council Linux app format function. I'm going to go look at the help for that. So basically, it is the function that's used to format the name of the applications that are shown in that list. So in this case, we are, by default, it uses a default formatter, which is the one that puts the path and then the name of the application. But we're now going to change it to this Council Linux app format function name only function, which basically just does the same formatting without the path on the front. So now I'm going to run this little snippet of code. And I will run Council Linux app again. And now we see that it's just the name of the application, which looks a lot more clean. So that's a nice thing to have. We're also going to set up a key binding for this so that we can get to it more easily, because it kind of sucks to have to run metax to call Council Linux app. So I'm going to copy some key bindings here, or just one. And we're going to put this into our exwm config in our desktop.el. So let's switch over to desktop.org. And we'll drop it after some of the other key binding config here. So I'm going to drop it right here. And we're going to use, like I mentioned before, the exwm input set key command, which will do a key binding for us to a particular function. The nice thing about this command is it actually does work while exwm is running. So in the last episode of this series, I said that if you set exwm input global keys, it doesn't update until you restart exwm. The nice thing about input set key is that it does update while you're running. So if I press super space, which is this key binding right now, if I press super space, it doesn't do anything right now. It says undefined. But if I were to evaluate this line and then hit super space, it runs Council Linux app. So now you have a way to set up global key bindings that will work no matter whether you're inside of a normal buffer or an X buffer, or an exwm buffer. Oh, actually, it may not be working right here, right now. So you may have to restart exwm before that picks up for X buffers. But at least for normal Emacs buffers, it will work as expected. And finally, let's talk about locking the screen, because sometimes you need to lock your screen if you step away for a moment, or if you close your laptop lid and it goes into suspend mode, you want it to be locked whenever it comes back up. So we're going to use a very simple locking program called slock. That's part of the suck less tools. And this is a very interesting locker because it's kind of confusing if you've never used it before. It basically just has a single color on the screen with no prompting or anything. So if someone comes to try to use your computer and they press a button on the keyboard, they're going to be very confused by what's happening. They may think that the computer's broken, which is actually kind of good in some ways if you think about it. We're going to use apt install to install slock and another program called xsslock. And let's pull open eShell to do that right now. So we're going to install these two. And what xsslock does is it sets up a locker program so that it will be activated whenever the computer goes into suspend mode automatically. So that's kind of a nice thing to have, because normally your computer won't do that if you aren't using one of the other window managers. At least I think so. GDM may have some functionality built in for this where it will lock your screen when you put it into suspend if you're not using GNOME or if you're using some other window manager. I'm not certain because I didn't get a chance to test it on my own machine. I'm just running this in a VM, so your mileage may vary here, but this does seem to work to some degree. So if you have problems with your computer, like if it locks when it suspends and it doesn't unlock, I would say just stop using XSS lock, because maybe it's your login manager's locking functionality that's kicking in and causing problems. Okay, so now that we have those installed, we can just run slock right here, I think, if that's not going to be a major issue. So, okay, I ran slock. If I press enter or click, now we see that we have a single colored screen, which looks very interesting on the stream. I'm going to start typing in my password, and as I type in normal characters, the screen will turn blue, and I press enter, and then the screen unlocks. So it doesn't really give you any other indication that you're having success other than you just pressing enter and then it logs you in. Otherwise, if you press the wrong password and press enter, it gives you like a red screen again, which is kind of funny. So let's set this up so that it runs automatically by default. So we will go back to our desktop config, and we're going to add this into the startup script for Exwm. What we're going to do is we're going to copy over some config I've already got set up here, and we just run XSS lock, and we're sort of passing through the slock command so that that's the one that gets launched whenever XSS lock finds the computer in suspend mode. Now, I can't show this working because I can't put this VM into suspend in the right way. Maybe I could, but I'm not going to bother doing that right now because I don't want to break the system. But at least when we start up our environment the next time, then that suspend locking will be activated. One other interesting thing about slock is that seems to be the default locker that is picked by the desktop environment package we talked about before. If you look at the variable for desktop environment screen lock command, by default it is set to slock. So now we have this nice command, desktop environment, I think it's lock screen, and it's automatically bound to super L. So if I run this command, it will lock your screen. So if you've ever used Windows before, they also have a key binding set up for the Windows key L to lock the screen. So if you are used to that, then you'll feel right at home here because it will work the same way. So I'm going to log back in now, and then I'm going to hit super L to lock the screen. That is a pretty nice thing to have for quick locking. Okay, I think that was pretty much everything that I wanted to cover topic-wise. Let me check the chat one more time. Lazo says, can you have master window on left-hand side and many other slave windows on the right-hand side? There isn't a built-in way to do that with Exwm. However, I think there are probably other Emacs packages that provide that functionality. If anybody knows of any, I would love to hear about it because it would be good to talk about in a future video about, you know, more advanced window management tricks. But I feel pretty confident that Emacs has a package somewhere that makes that functionality possible. Let's see. GK Sudo says, if someone tried to use your computer with Exwm running, they'd probably leave it alone unless they know Emacs. Well, they would probably be very confused because it would look like you're just got like a full screen text editor. They wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't have anything obvious to click on. So that is also kind of a benefit whenever you use a weird computing setup. People won't know how to mess with your computer. Okay, I think that's everything we wanted to cover today. So next time, I'm not sure yet what we'll do. We may do some more window management tricks, or we may go into setting up like desktop notifications and panel. So I would love to hear your suggestions about what you would like to see for a desktop environment setup. Please let me know in the comments of the video after the stream is complete, or leave comments on the GitHub repository, Emacs from Scratch. And also join the Discord community if you're interested in talking to more people about Exwm, because we have been talking a lot about it there. There's links in the live chat and also inside of the inside of the description of the video. So if you join there, there's an Exwm channel where you can talk to other people and find out like more tricks for things you can use. Miguel asks, what distro do you recommend that's stable, non-updated, but not out of date? Well, stable, non-updated, but not out of date. I mean, probably Ubuntu's long-term stable desktop environment is pretty good because, like you see here, it is fairly stable. It has all the things we need for this. However, it does get a little bit more out of date. Like right now, this is Ubuntu 20, and it only has Emacs 26, when 27 has been stable for a while. So it's not necessarily the most up-to-date thing. So other people may need to give their distro recommendations. For me personally, I use GNU Geeks, but that it has a lot of learning curve attached. I'll cover that in another video stream in the future. And then there's like one distro that I do like is Manjaro, which is kind of an offshoot of Arch Linux. It does have that sort of rolling release style, but and you do get updates quite often, but it's more of a polished experience in Arch, because with Arch or Arc, however you want to call it, you have to do a lot of things yourself to set it up. So it really just depends on your tolerance to configuration problems. Jeff says, instead of expand file name emacsd, consider using the user Emacs directory. Yes, we discussed that earlier. GK Sudo says, could you commit these changes to GitHub? Yep, definitely. I'm going to check this in after we finish the stream here. So I think next Friday we may not have a stream because it's a holiday week in the US, but we'll continue this series the Friday after that. However, next Wednesday we will be talking about setting up a Python configuration for LSP mode and DAP mode. I did a poll on YouTube a couple days ago, and the overwhelming majority of people wanted to see Python. We will cover the other videos that we talked about in that poll another time, but we're going to do Python first, so that should be pretty interesting. Okay. Lastly, I just want to thank our sponsors. We have, I think, 22 GitHub sponsors now. I'm very, very thankful for all the people who have decided to support the streams and the videos we're making in the community in general. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor of the channel to support what we're doing here, go check out the link at github.com/sponsor/DavidWill. I want to call out specifically Craig Jennings. I think I left out Drake X here, and also the Nerdy Hamster that are sponsoring at the $15 level. You guys are amazing. So thank you all for becoming sponsors, and check out the link below if you're interested in doing that as well. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody, for joining today. Hopefully you got something interesting and useful out of that. And until next time, happy hacking. We'll see you then.